dear viewer. Today we'll be talking about some Atari games. Games like Combat, Adventure, E.T. We're not talking about Yars' Revenge. I don't know why I put this on the stack. It's a good game though. Until recently, I had always written off the Atari 2600 as a bad game console that had a bunch of crappy games. Partially thanks to my favorite book, Ready Player One. I've been giving it a shot again lately. Games like Adventure, I'd heard of them, but I didn't think they could be that good. And I finally got around to playing it, and I really enjoyed it. And been kind of digging in a little bit more, finding some other gems on the system. When I was a kid back in the 80s, all of my peers loved chocolate ice cream, which makes sense because chocolate ice cream is amazing, but I became a vanilla apologist because of this. I felt that vanilla was a fine flavor and that it was being passed over for not being hip and cool. I made sure that whenever I had a choice for ice cream flavor, I got vanilla because I was worried that this father of frozen cream delight would be pushed aside and forgotten. It's weird, it doesn't make sense, and chocolate is a better choice. I bring this up because I think that some people view E.T. on the Atari this way. It's such an overwhelmingly hated game, but it can't really be the worst, right? So here's the thing, I just invented a game. Your goal in this game is to punch yourself in the face as hard as you can. You go first. So, my game is worse than E.T., but here's the difference. I didn't swindle anyone out of their money for my crappy game. I didn't launch a marketing campaign to convince parents to buy this for their kids. I didn't tell the programmer of my game that he couldn't put his name in the credits. I didn't mess up a deal to sell Nintendo's Famicom console in North America. I didn't release an unfinished version of Driver 3 and pay reporters to give it great ratings. Atari loves short-term earnings, and they will burn any bridge they cross if it means a few extra bucks. Never trust Atari. Here's the story of why I personally hate E.T. and Atari. When I was a child, my mom had a friend that was an Atari collector. Her basement had two shelves that went along the entire length of the wall, and they were both filled with Atari 2600 games in alphabetical order. I loved it when we got to go over to her house because my mom wanted to talk with her friend, and her friend was like, "Yo kid, you can play on the Atari." Okay, they probably didn't say it like that. It was probably filled with 80s talk like, "I'm so sure," "grody," and "barf." Remember Barf from You Can't Do That on Television?
Right, Stephanie, because I put in 4 rats and 6 cockroaches in each one of my 5 burgers.
So I would pick through this wall of games and make my selection. The first video game that I ever remember playing was at this house. I selected Combat, which was included with the purchase of an Atari 2600 at the time. I loved this game. Tanks driving around shooting at each other? This was modern technology at its best. I didn't have to pay 25 cents to start a new game. My mom had the coolest friends. I was hyped and ready for some gaming madness, so I put Combat away and took a look at the wall again, and there it was, the best game ever made, E.T. I had never played this game before, but I had seen and loved the movie, so it was an easy pick. Slap that game into the console and nothing. E.T. is a game of trying to figure out what's going on while falling into pits. Huh, Pitfall. This is when I realized that the Atari had crappy versions of the good games found in arcades. I turned off the Atari and found a ball or something to play with. A few years later I was brought back into gaming when Nintendo and Sega made it cool again by introducing something called quality control. Because of these events in my childhood, I had written off the Atari 2600 as a bad gaming console filled to the brim with shovelware titles, and while this isn't inaccurate, I did miss a lot of great games. Thanks to the novel Ready Player One, I'll never shut up about this book, I did make it a mission to play and beat Adventure and also to unlock the Easter egg. Well, dear viewer, I did that, and it was a blast. I also recently beat E.T. Not a blast, but I do have a sort of respect for the game that I didn't have before. Let's start with Adventure. This is a game created by Warren Robinett, a man who went on to make educational games in 1980s VR for NASA. I didn't know what to expect from the game. I had heard there were duck-shaped dragons and knew there was a hidden key, but I jumped into my first game without looking up a guide. While wandering around, I was able to figure out some of the basics. If you touch an item, you'll carry it around. Pressing the Atari controller's only button causes you to drop the item, which is useful when you need to switch carried items. It also may be useful for keeping the bat thing from stealing your stuff. I don't know if this is true, but that bat thing makes me play irrationally. I was convinced it was programmed to be as annoying as possible and that dropping important items and coming back for them later may be safer. I don't know if this is true or not, but it gets into your head. I did eventually look up a guide and read part of the manual, and this made me respect the game even more. You can find a map of the maze in Adventure, but there are so many things that will move around that no two games will ever be the same. Your goal is always the same, but how you achieve it will always be different. There are 3 keys to unlock 3 castles and 3 ducks trying to eat you. Your ultimate goal is to find the enchanted chalice and return it to the golden castle. The dragons Yorgel, Grundle, and Rindle will try to eat you, halting your progress in the game. If you are captured in the tummy of one of these dragons, you don't die exactly. You respawn in front of the golden castle and any killed dragons are brought back to life, but all the items around the stage are probably where you left them. I say probably because there is a rage-inducing bat that will pick things up and move them around. Sometimes the bat helps, as he can also be dragged around a bit if you catch him. That is to say that if the bat has the sword, but you catch the bat, you can still stab dragons using the sword that the bat is holding. Be careful though, when a dragon dies, its body just kind of lays there as an unpassable obstacle. Try to bring it to an open area before pushing a crudely drawn arrow through its body. If the body is in your way, you have some options. Die causing the dragon to come back to life, or wait for the bat to move the corpse, which he'll probably never do because his job is to annoy you. Keys open castles, swords stab dragons, dragons eat heroes, bats are clumsy kleptomaniacs. Only 2 gameplay items left to talk about, the magnet and the bridge. The magnet pulls items towards itself. This can be useful, but it can also be a pain. If your item is on the other side of a wall, the magnet will bring it to you. If the magnet is on the other side of a wall and you drop an item, it will be dragged out of reach. It's rarely useful, but it is an interesting mechanic that adds some chaos to the mix. And finally, the bridge. What a cool item this is. I've been referring to the non-passable stage parts as walls, but I believe they're actually a moat, as this bridge item allows you to cross them. I prefer to think of it as a magical portal that lets you walk through walls though. But that's what it does. You place it on top of a wall you want to cross and walk through it and come out the other side. How cool is that? This is like Portal's one-button joystick grandfather right here. Now the last 2 items, the enchanted chalice and the hidden key. The enchanted chalice is easy to describe. It's the holy grail that you bring home to earn a win. But then there's the hidden key. This can sort of be found by understanding Atari's programming. Atari can only have 2 moving objects at a time. Any more than 2 causes flickering like the ghosts in that terrible Pac-Man port. If you walk into the maze behind the Black Castle and you're carrying an item, that's 2 moving objects. There's 1 room with no other objects in it, but you and your item begin to flicker. This means that there's a 3rd item in here somewhere. If you bring the bridge down here to the southern end of this area, you can walk into the wall and you'll come out carrying this small block that's almost impossible to see thanks to the gray backgrounds in most of the game. What to do with it now is a bit tricky. Drag it back to this area near the Golden Castle starting zone. You'll need another item to be in this room too. Notice how this wall changes color? When it goes gray, which matches the floor color, it becomes possible to walk over it. In the room beyond is the first Easter egg in a video game. This was done because Atari refused to let programmers put their name on their games. This was a little bit of tech graffiti, a way of giving the suits the finger. Well, that's how I see it at least. There are 3 modes to this game, each harder than the last. I beat mode 1 and 2 and found the Easter egg on mode 2. The egg can only be found in modes 2 and 3. This was a lot of fun. It was challenging and fast-paced and it made me plan things out ahead of time. But then I realized something terrible. E.T. is sort of like Adventure. In E.T., you run around collecting 4 phone parts so you can phone home. There's an FBI agent and a scientist running around trying to catch you and rob you of your phone parts. That sort of sounds like find 3 keys to get to the chalice that you need to bring back to your castle, doesn't it? As an adult who understands that I may have to read the manual in order to understand a game, I can't in good conscience say that E.T. was bad for being confusing. Adventure was also confusing, so let's break down the mechanics behind E.T. and see if it really is a bad game. In E.T., your goal is to find 4 phone parts that are randomly hidden in 4 pits. After putting this phone together, you find a spot with good reception to phone home, then you run to the alien landing spot to be picked up before their counter runs out. I'm kidding about the reception thing, but you do need to find a spot where you can use the phone. I don't know what the logic behind it was. Reception seems like as good an excuse as any. All of this is fine. It's frustrating that you absolutely have to read the manual or a guide, but it just wasn't feasible to have an in-game tutorial at the time. So what is it that makes E.T. so bad? I think it boils down to 2 things, the confusing map and constantly falling into pits. If you're confused by the E.T. map, I'm about to blow your mind. It's on a cube. That's why it seems to repeat in strange ways, which makes it easy to get lost. Here's how I think about it. The top of the cube has the house and the jail. The bottom of the cube has the forest, which is where you start your game and where you end it as well. The 4 sides are the pit areas that may contain phone parts. The cube idea is interesting, but constantly falling into pits is so frustrating. So frustrating. Now that we're in a pit, we just need to do this next thing to get out. No problem. Oh cool, we're in a pit again. This aspect of the game was poorly implemented. If you ever decide to give this game a shot, after coming out of a pit, immediately try to hover to the side. Continuing to hold up on the joystick, which seems like the thing to do, will just land you back at the bottom of the pit again. Talk to anyone that's ever played this game. You can see the gamer rage on their face at the mention of these pits. If constantly falling into holes isn't enough torture, there's also this energy count that has to be watched closely. There is an ability to call Elliot and turn in your Reese's Pieces for more energy, but it doesn't always work. Finally, there's the two guys out to steal your phone parts, much like the Bat in Adventure. I think what makes E.T. bad is that it feels unfair. The Bat in Adventure stealing items is frustrating, but you know the items are out there and can be found again. When the phone parts get stolen from E.T., it means you have to jump into more frustrating pits to get them back. I will say E.T. is less bad once you know how to play it, but it and heaps of shovelware titles did put Atari out of business. Kind of makes you wonder about the mobile phone game market. At least E.T. didn't have microtransactions, although I'm sure Atari would have added them if they were given a chance. While we're on the subject of E.T., if you've ever heard the rumor about a dump in New Mexico filled with E.T. carts, it's real. There's a documentary on Netflix about it called Atari Game Over. On that note, notice how they put the latitude and longitude on the thumbnail? You can type that into Google Maps if you want to see the dig location. Another quick note, Ernest Cline, author of my favorite book, Ready Player One, is also in that documentary. You know, I originally bought these 4 ET cartridges that I have to use them as coasters. I haven't done it yet, but I think that really, some people think that's really funny, some people it really gets under their skin, so if I ever do it, I probably won't admit to it. I don't know what to say for the outro, so video's over. Like, comment, subscribe, click the thing with your finger, you'll like it. You'll like all my videos, except for my old videos. That's a wasteland, don't go there. Bye!